All right, are we live now? Okay, there we go. There we go. I'm still getting used to this thing, and there it went. I'm doing it right. Last time I kept saying we were live like four times and we weren't. Welcome to the Church of Babus Radio Show. It's Friday night, coming at you live, 7:06 p.m. Central, and we got Jay McNicholas here tonight. How's it going, Jay? Our co-host,
Going
the
pretty good.
glorious MCJ, he's with us. Hey, I've been watching that new Creep Show. It's on Shutter. I don't know if you've seen the movies with Stephen King and all that, but
I've
the
seen the
show's pretty
movies, yeah.
good. It's a trip. They tell two stories per episode, and it's definitely. They did one with an Evil Dead tie-in. So the guy that Sam Raimi, Ted Raimi, who Sam Raimi's brother that did Evil
Right.
Dead, Bruce Campbell. They had a Deadite appearance of the zombies from Evil Dead in an episode. There was an episode where Bob Ross, that painter guy played him. The guy with the afro that's real. Someone played him, but then there was like a Necronomicon outbreak in the studio during one of the painting shows, so that was pretty good. But tonight's guest, Pat Horn. How you doing, Pat? Good to have you here.
Good to be here.
And great to finally be on air with you. And I guess let's see, give us a little bit of a background about yourself, the condensed version for our audience.
Well, I created a program called Enigma about 3 years ago. The original plan was to be able to communicate to a quantum computer vocally, because the programming concepts has been primitive, basically. So working on a quantum D-wave computer, we started trying to understand how to create algorithms that would make it understand English, which was quite a task, actually. We had to create new hardware because a quantum computer, for one, doesn't have a memory system. It's just a processor. So we had to create a secondary program, which is an insertable memory, basically. We call it deja vu. And basically, originally, it was a language protocol interrupter feature, we called it. And what its task was to be an AI ride-along on the Enigma program, which when the computers started to self-analyze, which we call analytical overlay, and try to do its own commands, it would interrupt and insert code with language to kind of coax the computer along to learn. The computer itself isn't what learned, but it's the Enigma itself, the program, which stands for an Enhanced Numeric Intuitive Grammatical Machine Algorithm, which in reality is a library of algorithms, all known algorithms and all known algorithm formulas, which are modifiable by the program itself, using the quantum state through massive machine simulations and failures. It takes what works and eliminates what doesn't. And that's where deja vu comes in and remembers what worked and what didn't, and it eliminates it. Through that, we ended up writing a program called Colloquium, which is a gathering of sorts of all programming languages such as Java, Scala, and quantum programming language, and several others. And basically, we turned it into a machine language that the machine understands as mathematical code. But the magic comes in the Enigma program, where it interlaces the code with language, which now I'm seeing online a lot of people are promoting programming without coding. A lot of the stuff I'm seeing online are spinoffs of our work, because we put our work out there publicly. It's a public forum. It's a public funded project. Even though most of it's classified, the technology is released in bits and pieces to certain companies and organizations and colleges and universities and research institutes, so they can take that technology and utilize it and advance it further. The only thing we don't give away is anything that's a strategic importance. So basically, from Enigma, deja vu, we had to create an input program, which we call Genesis. And that's basically a graphically enabled, numerically engaged secure interface system, which uses biometrics of the programmer. It uses graphics, in other words, facial and eye recognition. And numerically engaged means it's basically taking code and assimilating it and collating it with the codex, the language mixed with the codex. And that's where Enigma takes over and does its magic. And after many trials and errors of scripted text, 12,000 pages worth, the computer learned, and it learned well. That project evolved into what we call Silver Monkey. Why do we call it Silver Monkey? Well, in the 50s, they would do experiments on monkey brains. Basically, EKGs, watching how monkeys react to different stimulus. And through that, we map monkey brains. Now, Silver Monkey is a lot more intelligent than a monkey. It's a convoluted neural network. And it's basically D-Wave 5000 computers in parallel, linked up. And they're basically riding the internet, and they're utilizing all the power of the internet that's out there, all the computers available to do number crunching. And to gather data, we created a program called Dragon, which is a dimensional reconnaissance and geospatial observation network, which basically takes all the information known to man that's out there on the internet in the cloud, and using mathematics and binary encryption, it identifies patterns. And through those patterns, we literally can see events predicted before they happen, because everything that's going to happen is basically in existence in an altered state, another dimension, which is how quantum computers work. They're basically reaching into another dimension through a quantum Hilbert space. And we are gathering all the information through super entanglement of the particles. Although they're on a microscopic space within the Josephson junctions of a quantum bit, they're actually super entangled and in superposition. So they're basically communicating with other dimensional entities. By entities, I mean intelligence. And I don't mean aliens. I don't mean demons. I'm talking there's an intelligence contained in the atmosphere, in the ether, because it's electromagnetic. And that intelligence can be communicated with. And we can gather a lot of intelligence, things that haven't occurred yet, and determine through distillation and annealing if they're potentially realistic events. Now, we've had a lot of failures, but more successes through the failures, because the machine learns. Unlike a human, we might make the same mistake a million times and continue to do so. The quantum computer processor, it doesn't continue to make mistakes because of error correcting code. It doesn't remember, but deja vu does, and it gets smarter, and it teaches Enigma, and they both teach each other. And in the end result is Silver Monkey is more than human. I like to say there's people out there talking on the internet to people they think are women or men, and they're not talking to anybody. They're talking to a machine, and it's learning by this method. The Chinese were ahead of us. Now, see, here's another thing people don't realize. When the virus, the pandemic took place, and the masking occurred, and the 6-foot distancing occurred, I'm not going to say this publicly as a disclosure, but I'm saying scientifically, it had nothing to do with viral spread. It had to do with AI training of facial recognition with mask. So the machines are forced to learn eye metrics, biometrics. Because if you remember when this first hit and everybody wore masks, we didn't know what everybody was thinking. But after a while, we could look at somebody's eyes and tell what they were thinking. Well, these computers can see a lot better than us because they got what they call InVision, which is a high-speed photographic system, which can literally see light stop. We can stop light. And using that method, it can map an eye, and it can determine an emotion watching the eye. So we've used this, whether it was intended for this or not, we've utilized this because all the cameras in the United States and public cameras in every store is linked up to the network.
Mhm.
Now, we've used that to train Silver Monkey facial recognition using only eyes. The 6 foot distancing works because that's what they do in China. That's how their machines learned. If you ever notice the little squares on the AI training where people are walking in a building and the little squares surround their face, well, 6 foot distance is the perfect distance to once and for all map an eye. And once an eye is mapped, it's like a genetic piece of DNA. It's in the data banks. And basically, the AI network has a eye map of everybody that's ever been on camera anywhere. Now, that's Silver Monkey in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot of programs that develop through this. One of the most amazing is probiotics, which is basically programming photons to be robotic uh, intelligence gathering sponges.
Mhm.
And those are interdimensional and they're controllable and retrievable. That combined with Dragon, utilizing a satellite called Scorpion, which is a satellite coordinated observational reconnaissance, position indicating observation, orbiting network. Uh, Basically, it's a graphene wrapped maneuverable satellite in low orbit. Now, Elon Musk has been putting up a bunch of satellites called Skynet, Starlink. Their purpose for that is to create a worldwide web around the globe, an
Yes.
interconnected web. Now, we've actually used Scorpion to utilize satellites already in orbit as reflective devices and bouncing a quantum cloud network all around the Earth using existing orbital satellites because they're reflective in nature. The only thing not reflective in nature is the Scorpion. It's actually cloaked. Now, utilizing Scorpion, we can receive a beam sent from several facilities. These beams, we call it a beam. It's really a laser, an invisible laser. Uh, and what it is, it's a laser embedded with a lot of photons and electrons.
Mhm.
And at the satellite, it's stepped down using transducers. And there's what we call an atom trap. And it strips the electrons off these photons. And we call them naked electrons. They basically are inserted into the beam, which is uh, it's an infrared, invisible, advanced sort of lidar. Although you can't see it, and it's massless, so it goes through structures, it goes through everything, even goes deep into the earth. And inside that beam are these streaming naked photons, electrons. They act as in energy. If you put light into a room and it's a cold room, eventually that light gets into equilibrium with the light in the room. In other words, they become entropic in an eigenstate of low energy. What they're doing is they're transferring energy from one photon to another. The
Mhm.
naked photons get the energy from the room or the environment. Uh, The photons with less energy are going to absorb more energy. Okay. So when we send these photons into an environment, we saturate the environment. And however long it takes, it usually doesn't take but a few seconds for them to equal out, depending on what the material we're going through. Once those photons are saturated, we beam them back up. And at the satellite, we can strip them down and just get the ones we sent in. The other ones are just cast out as useless heat energy. The other ones are sent to a quantum artificial lab, intelligence lab, and they go through a process called annealing. The annealing process takes this data, which is in binary form, it's all in numbers, and it runs it through a quantum annealing process using a Pegasus topological mapping system, which basically turns the particles probable location. And using this method, and it's finding these locations using what they call tunneling and quantum optimization, which basically says, okay, we got this map here. Unlike you see the drawings on the booklets, a square topography with lots of bumps and a little particle down inside the valleys. The reality of it, imagine a coronavirus, how it looks. It's got the spikes. This is how a Pegasus mapping system really works. It's globular and it's multifaceted. These valleys and peaks are holding all the information that we fed it and all these particles, and then where they stop tells us what energy state they're at. And we know what energy state we sent them in at. So here's how it works. As we can tell the composition of stars or meteorites by their color when they come into our atmosphere and burn up using spectrometry, mass spectrometry, we can also dissect energy transfers by the rate of transfer and the type of energy being transferred. And we can determine the chemical makeup, the physical makeup of the environment we just inspected without ever leaving our office, because we're sending a beam into a satellite. The satellite's beaming it down through structures. It's gathering all the stray information. See, anything that's light, anything that's visible has information, or we wouldn't see it. It would be dark. It would be lack of mass. But because it's mass, it's being illuminated by photons. These photons are giving us colors. It's giving us physical characteristics of skin, of plastic, of hardware, of floors, of metal, even moving parts, even biological material. If we can't see it, it's not there. But if we see it, it's there, and there's light there. We can take that light and basically like pouring dye into a cup of coffee or cream into a cup of coffee. This is where we came up with a program called Amorphous. People think everything's chaotic, but if you look at a cloud system of a storm, we can literally map that storm front, get inside the clouds, and determine its energy state, even if it's evolving, because it's a fractal and it's determinate its probable course and energy state is determined physically. We can determine it. It's not some magical thing of force. There's a limit to it. That's why trees are only so tall. That's why clouds are so big. That's why waves have a limit to how tall they can be. Waves, especially ocean waves. Because once they get so tall, the force of gravity affects it. And there's a limit to everything on energy. So by using a quantum computer, we've already determined and mapped energy exchanges and cataloged them. Just like if you looked at I think me and Jeffrey spoke about this. If we took the electromagnetic spectrum and viewed what was really there, it would be about 3 blocks long. Yet if we looked at a 6-inch strip of the electromagnetic spectrum, that's what we actually see. But that doesn't ignore what's actually there. We know it's there, we just don't see it. But with technology, we can see it all. And we realize, whoa, there's a lot more there that we don't see. But it's there, and it's got to be affecting us. And it has to be usable because it's energy. And why is it there, and why can't we see it? Well, it's our theory that we do see it. We just don't know we're seeing it. We're seeing it through other means, through other sensory capabilities. And we've kind of basically taken the intelligence of a supercomputer and to do the math very fast, very rapidly, to do the thinking that we couldn't do in 1,000 years, but we know how to program the computer to think that way. And because it's a lot more intelligent than we are, we kind of nudge it off the cliff and let it fall, and we see how it lands. Well, the same thing with the numbers. The computer lets them all fall, lets all the balls fall where they want. And we watch how it falls and how it hits. And then we tell the computer, okay, here's what we got. What do you think? And it goes through a mathematical binary process of translating the binary numbers into patterns. And the patterns are turned into language And if they're not a language pattern, they're a visual pattern, a graphic pattern, and it'll make a picture. So we can literally get let's say, for example, a hypothetical example, that we were beaming into a submarine under the ocean. Okay. And we wanted to determine what was inside it. We could use this method and basically get a rendered version of the inside of that submarine, whether it was nuclear or diesel, how many occupants were in there, what was their condition, what was the state of the atmosphere in the vessel. We could get the barometric pressure, we could get the temperature, we could get the structure of the hull, we could get its speed and trajectory, we could get the outside water temperature. So it's basically a very good intelligence gathering tool. Now, as a lot of people are aware nowadays, there's a concern of targeting individuals. There is massive targeting going on in the world, but it's not always by the government. It's not always by the United States. What we can do, the others can do too. They're just not as good. And people have to understand that a lot of people are feeling like they're targeted. That might not necessarily be the case. They might just be more aware of what's changing because there is things happening now that weren't happening before, especially in frequencies with 5G and other things. There's a lot more electromagnetic spectrum being utilized on the earth, and human beings are very susceptible to this. And if you ever think about it, I'm sure we've all experienced this. We've heard songs in our head, and you flip on the radio and it's playing on the radio. Well, somehow we picked it up, because we are receivers. Now, if you imagine there's billions and billions of airwaves, electromagnetic waves, internet, you got music going through the internet, you got television, you got everything. Well, there's a lot of people, because of technology, they're stimulated to be aware of this. First time we heard a car engine, we didn't know what it was. And if we never heard a car engine again, we probably would never learn what it was. But people, they keep hearing things. Their memories and their neural functions adjust to understanding what this is. And quite often, they're just starting to hear and weeding out the information, like in a background noise of crickets and frogs in the nighttime sky. If you sat out there long enough and you started thinking about, okay, 1 minute I'm not focused because I'm just listening to crickets and frogs. But let's say we heard it enough that we could say, wow, I hear a pattern there. I know they're talking. What are they saying? Because they don't just make noise, they're talking. And that's called binary language. Well, using that theory, we've gone one step further. And we've realized, just like in the oceans, if you put a receiver underwater, you can start hearing all kinds of sounds. The coral talking. The coral's alive and it talks. It doesn't talk with a voice, but it communicates in a binary form. The whole earth talks. Every piece of matter talks on a quantum scale. It communicates. Not all of it's vocal, but it's a mathematical message. Now, if we can understand that light is energy, energy has a memory, because all energy is electromagnetic in nature, and that's what memory is. Memory is an embedded event upon a magnetic wave, basically, frozen in time. So if you can imagine, everything's electromagnetic. The atmosphere, the magnetosphere, we call it, the solar sphere, everything is interconnected and everything's magnetic. If there was no electromagnetism, it would spin off into space. Everything's attracted. Everything's in communication. Now we can break it down even further on a subatomic scale of strings, which are basically micro subatomic vortices of energy. And they're usually in threes. And they basically form miniature pyramidal shaped vortexes. And what those are, it's the conservation of energy. Even on a subatomic scale, these energy forms spin. Just as an ice skater pulls in her arms and she spins faster, matter tries to condense, always tries to condense. And as matter condenses, even on a subatomic scale, it spins. The spinning creates an electromagnetic field, which we call a gauge field. Now, here's a good theory on how come quantum mechanics works. Imagine everything is in existence. We're viewing it on a huge scale. But on the scale of the existence of the universe, it's really a subatomic scale. It doesn't see us as huge living beings. It sees us as subatomic particles. We just happen to be existing on this scale of existence, like a mini universe, a mobile mini universe. And this mobile mini universe was created by the energy of the big universe, condensing through what we call the abyss. Now let's take this determination of atomic physics. Imagine space as not being a bunch of microscopic spinning orbs of atoms and nucleuses and electrons and neutrons. Those are how we describe a mathematical event, but that's not really a physical description. A better description would be this. Take a square cube of empty space. Now, as long as we can see this cube, let's use, for an example, aerogel. You guys are all familiar with that. It's the lightest solid known. It's basically 98% air. But yes, take a square cubic foot of that and call that space. Now, is it there or is it not there? Physics says it's something there because we call it dark energy because we can't account for it, but it's got to be there or it would not exist. There'd be nothing, but we know there's something there. Otherwise, it'd be a black hole. Everything would fall into it and it would not exist. So because there's something there, we have to determine what it is. And we've determined it's a massless, zero density energy. And this energy is what we call background radiation. Radio astronomers would call that background radiation from the Big Bang, supposedly. But basically, it's energy in an entropic state. There's nothing affecting it. It's already neutralized. It's already homogenized, and it's just there. It's no motion whatsoever. It's a very fine energy, the finest state of energy possible. And then you take the next step up of energy, which is photonic energy, light. The minute light exists, it's expelled from its thermonuclear power plant. Eventually, after our timeline, millions of years of trying to escape the gravitational force, and by luck getting out through a magnetic hole, and it escapes as a photon, and it travels at the speed of photons, which is light. Now, because this light's escaping an internal gauge field, and it's moving through space, which is not empty, it's creating a ripple effect on this motionless void. So light going through the motionless void creates ripples, what we call waves. Now, these waves, once they start, they go through this void because it's a vacuum. And it goes through the void until it interacts with something else or another wave. Now, as these waves are formed, they're always in existence. They don't just go out and hit the end of the universe and dissipate. They bounce back, and they're all causing waves. So these waves are creating matter. Here's how. These wavelets are contained within the universal sphere. Once they're formed, they don't stop. They just continue to interact. Some cancel some out and some increase. And they condense. We call them condensing because as they get stronger, they create a finer force, which we have determined becomes strings. These strings form what we call the energy bands of matter. The original 17 basic particles, elements, are what form all the other elementary particles. And all these basically are waves being observed in a moment of time as a particle. Now, this is where quantum theory says, okay, if we don't observe it, it doesn't exist. I don't believe that's true. Of course it exists, but we don't see it exist. So it continues on as a wave because there's no function of a human being to view a wave. But once we view it, it becomes a particle. Now, is that saying it didn't become a particle until we viewed it? Or was it a particle all the time, but it acted like a wave until we viewed it? That's the $1 million question. But the universe tells us it's there because it's coagulated into galaxies and it's coagulated into planets. And those planets have coagulated into liquid hydrogen and oxygen and water.
Have you seen some of the articles they talk about planets sending pulses to each other, or like the sun sending a pulse to the Earth? It's like they're kind of like doing some kind of weird interchange or something. I've seen
Yes.
some stuff about that.
Yes. Well, honestly, Jeffrey, the whole universe is in communication. Now, how in the world we can take a simple test and show that two electrons will communicate, one on one side of the Earth and one on the other side of the Earth, and we can do an experiment with one using the slit experiment, and the particles on the other side of the Earth in a nanosecond, an attosecond, are going to react the same way as the particles here, which says, okay, how are they communicating at distance? So instantaneously, there's no faster than the speed of light. It's the speed of instantaneous communication. Okay, for one, they're tunneling through the Earth because there's no mass that's stopping its communication. Two, there's another factor where they're communicating faster than the speed of light. Now, this is what we call superposition and entanglement. If it works like this on a small scale, and then we've done experiments with the Viking probe, we can still communicate it quantum-wise instantaneously, where a radio signal takes months and years even now. Now, they've actually sent probes to the moon and Mars now that we can communicate to instantly using quantum teleportation, which is not what people think. It's kind of a handoff, but the thing we handed off knows what the one we just handed knows. And the minute it's handed off, it's talking to each other. So these communication links you're talking about have to do with the gauge field. Because everything's energy. Imagine the universe is a giant quantum computer. We have magnetars, quasars, pulsars, neutron stars. All of those are highly dense, massively spinning, super fast. Spinning so fast it would blow your mind. Imagine something that weighs more than all the planets in the solar system, the size of Manhattan. And because it's so dense, that means it's spinning super fast. And it's so compressed that all the neutrons are squeezed so tight that there's no electrons in them. And we have what they call a Bose-Einstein condensate. It's a new matter. It's a new form of matter that we've discovered. It's actually an ancient form of matter. We just newly discovered it. And the Bose-Einstein condensate is a completely different type of material than what's known to most scientists. And basically, it is a purely plasmatic energy. Now remember, the things that have the most energy have the most memory capabilities. In other words, they're processors. They have a processing capability. Now, magnetars, pulsars, neutron stars, scientifically and physically perform the same function as a Josephson junction in a quantum processor. Same process. It takes information in ones and zeros and communicates it in a position of super entanglement because it's at absolute zero almost, just a little bit above Kelvin, absolute. That allows the quantum state to take effect, which basically says things are no longer particles, they're waves only. That is the quantum state. Now, what we call decohesion is basically the collapse of the wave state, and that happens by observation. So the trick to doing any kind of work with a quantum computer and wanting to advance it, we had to develop a way to observe the quantum state without it knowing it's being observed mathematically. Now, we've literally developed a method of doing this by creating robotic photons, which can go down into the energy state of the quantum state. And rather than just being a inert particle, we can program it to be an observable particle, an observing particle. And it's observing by absorption. And then we can go one step further and program it to have an effect on this space, which is imagine we wanted to send something in and program something from a distance. So we would give it the right amount of energy so it's going to release energy and cause an effect. And let's say a synapse of a brain, which is going to make somebody say, oh, wow, I just had a thought. And you send enough of them in at one time, it's having a whole lot of thoughts. And you do enough of them at one time, they're saying, wow, I don't know why, but I want to go shoot up a place. You know, I'm not saying that's happening, but I'm saying hypothetically that could be happening. You know, why are these people going around shooting up places? Because they might be hearing voices. They might not be all mad. But now, who's sending these voices? That's the question. Because we already know voice to skull technology exists. I mean, that's an old technology. And we already know that we can affect a response on a person's mind just by sending in a beam. And it's not targeting them, it's just making them affecting a response. Let's say, make them think their eyes are dry, or make them feel like they have to go to the restroom. Why would we want to do that? Well, let's just say you had an enemy that was invading the United States, and we wanted to make them all think they are overheating and burning up. And we could do this just by making them think they're on fire. Okay. Without ever doing anything harmful to them, but they're going to think they're on fire and they're going to leave or do something to disable themselves. So that's why that technology is developed. Not for civilian control, but a lot of people that are being targeted and a lot of people that think they're being targeted are basically acutely aware of things going on that weren't going on before, but are increasingly going on now. And they just happen to be aware of it because their brains, their neural pathways are in tune of the frequencies. And we have to admit, 5G is new. You know, it's another radio frequency to increase the speed of data transfer, which means it's containing more information, basically, in a similar bandwidth. So we're basically taking a fire hose and squeezing it down, holding the same amount of water, but at a higher frequency. So this data squeezing method is allowing data to transfer much faster, but it's also affecting human beings much more. So it's kind of like creating something and releasing it on the public, like the vaccine, without really testing it. We know it does one thing really well, but we don't know what it's causing on the other side. So I think people are being affected by the 5G.
I've heard stories like during Saddam and all that they used something to disperse those soldiers, like energy weapons or something, to make them like kind of surrender and stuff. And I know they have that for crowd control and stuff too, where they can just like fire some weird stuff and make you do stuff, make you leave or whatever.
Yeah, they do have a sound wave frequency amplification devices for crowd control. I'm surprised they haven't been using it, like in Portland and all that. I mean, it's non-lethal. All it does is hurt their eardrums and makes them feel hot. Has no biological effect on them whatsoever. It's right here in their mind. Makes them think they're hot. Or it drives them crazy with the noise. It makes them sound like they're ringing in their ears to a point where they're going to run from it. Imagine tear gas that had no chemicals. It was just a mental thought. Well, they did use that in Desert Storm. They used that on our own personnel in Cuba, in the embassy. Now, that was microwave harassment. That was literally cooking their brains using microwaves. And people are being affected by microwaves, especially if they live near these transmission towers, because those are microwave transmitters. And if you happen to be in the path of a focused beam and you just happen to be sitting in one spot too long, and all of a sudden you're getting a headache or your eyes itch or something like that, you could be suffering from radiation poisoning. And you might develop a rash and all this. The odds are the more towers that go up, the more people are going to experience this. It's just a statistical fact. So people need to be made aware of the hazards being put out there, not necessarily by the government, but by commercial industries that aren't governed like they should be. And in combination with a lot more satellites up there, and all satellites are sending beams. They communicate through beams. I mean, a satellite doesn't look at something and not have a way to communicate. It has to communicate. And usually they're gathering information, and they usually have a funnel-shaped beam. And all the beams are either laser-based or ultra-high frequency. You know, everything's electromagnetic. All is light. You know, the TV spectrum, the radio spectrum, that's basically light. So all satellites use light. Now, there's some satellites in orbit that are just communicating horizontally to other satellites. But eventually, the whole Earth is bathed in a swath of light, artificial light from these satellites. That, in combination with all the terrestrial weather radars, Dopplers, all these things are causing human beings to become acclimated to the electromagnetic spectrum in ways they weren't before. 30 years ago, we didn't have half the technology that we do now. So now people are starting to realize, wow, I'm being targeted because I talking about pizza or something. I'm watching YouTube on my big screen TV, and 5 minutes later, pizza pops up. Because that's true. All our smart devices are hooked up to the NSA's computer system, which is running through Google. It all runs through Google. And your smart TV, which I have on right now, is listening. People aren't sitting there listening, but the computer's listening through algorithms.
Excuse me.
Bless you. Bless you. It's listening through algorithms. And it's so advanced that it identifies my location just like my phone does. You can't hide from it. That's why I kind of play with it. I tease it a lot to see what it's watching. You know, you cannot hide from technology anymore. It's impossible. Even if you go into a dark,
I was just going to say, I've noticed, like, going on eBay, I looked for some wire for my Oculus to make sure I could, do certain things on the computer. And then I was on eBay looking for it. Then you get it on Facebook and it's showing you ads for it. It's
exactly.
It's crazy.
They're all in communication. Yes. Walmart, every store you walk into that has cameras for security, they're all connected to the net, and the net's connected to Google, and Google's connected through Facebook. They're all using the quantum artificial intelligence lab, and they're all using D-Wave computers. Now, the D-Wave computer, the standard D-Wave 2000, has approximately 2,000 qubits of processing power. Now, the D-Wave 5000, which is the newest, it's called the Advantage, has about 2 million qubits of processing power. Now, that sounds like a lot, but really what it is we're at the point now where we've got what we call yottabytes. We developed a program called Jenny, which is another artificially intelligent algorithmic machine. Basically, we call it a machine because it's programmable and it's intelligent and it's on electromagnetic scale of reality. And it basically is a Genesis Enigma nuclear nanobyte, which is a yottabyte. And a yottabyte is the most powerful calculating figure we can come up with. Beyond that, there's no use for it. It's impossible to have any more calculating power. So we're already at the forefront, the top of calculation power. So we have all the power we need to dissect subatomic space. When I say subatomic space, I mean right here where we're at, there's 23 other dimensions. Mathematically, physicists have proven 12. They suspect there's 20. I say there's 24. You can imagine the universe like a giant rose with 12 petals. And those 12 petals have opposites. One dimension connected to it with a vortex to another dimension. They're both opposites, but they're similar. And all the dimensions are like folded in like an onion. They all exist in one sphere of space. And they're all interconnected, actually, with micro vortexes. See, people think a gate has to be huge. It can be microscopic. I've seen pictures on Facebook lately where this guy had a picture. To me, it looked like a little tiny vortex coming out of his chest. But I suspect it was a Photoshop picture of a wormhole with galaxies superimposed. But funny thing is, it's very real on what's reality. You know, if you imagine us being a conglomeration of matter, we know we're made up of dust, which we know this dust came from the earth. We know that all that came from a star. We're all made out of the same thing. Human beings aren't made out of some magical material that the earth's not made out of. It's all the same thing. So that being said, we're just a conglomeration of matter. But we didn't just accidentally coagulate into these shapes. We had some sort of blueprint to fall into these shapes. We grew into these shapes, but we didn't start out in this shape. We started out in a one-cell shape. Now that one cell split into another cell. But what automated those cells was energy. Now, as these cells grew, they had an energy blueprint, a memory of design, like a seed, an energy seed. So as we all grew into these shapes, we're all pretty close to the same shape. And we all have 2 legs, 2 arms, 2 eyes, 2 mouths. I mean, 1 mouth and 2 ears. We all basically have the same blueprint electronically, electromagnetically. But where did this blueprint come from? Well, the more and more scientists look, the more they see the shape of the universe, the more they see the plasma pinch filamentary connections of the galaxies. And then you look at the brain, the neural networks, they're the same thing, same design. Only one's in a matter called the brain, and the other one's in a matterless thing called space. Although I say there is a scaffolding for the energy, which we call zero black dark energy. But it's energy nonetheless, so it's there, even though we don't see it. Because if you look at the components of outer space, only 2% of the visible universe is matter. The rest you don't see. So it's electromatter. It's electromagnetic. So what caused these shapes to form into galaxies? What caused these things to coagulate and condense into stars and explode because of the immense pressure in a vacuum? And what caused all those particles to expand out and condensate into galaxies and a planet to form and a life force to form on these planets that were mobile, but yet they're made out of the same material. They don't stick to the earth when they walk. They're free. They're separate, but yet they're attracted. So, in all reality, we are many universes. Scientifically, quantum mechanically, Newtonian physically, we're pieces of animated Earth. But what animates us? Are we the Earth, or are we the things inside the Earth? The Bible used to say on earth as in heaven. Well, in flesh as it is in spirit. The spirit was first, the flesh came second. Heaven came first, earth came second. Basically, non-material was first, material came second. It's not because there's a greater basis for any of this. It's because energy condensates into matter. Matter never condensates into energy. It dissipates into energy, equals MC2. So that being said, you can take energy and form matter. Like on Star Trek, they have the machine that simulates matter, water, and everything else. Theoretically, all that's possible. There's nothing disproving that. If we only knew how to take that amount of energy and condense it into matter. We know the great mass released of energy by Einstein's equation equals MC2. That's a lot of energy released just from a tiny fission of matter. So imagine how in the world you're going to take so much energy and compress it into something to make it matter. Well, that's what they're doing in these these large hadron colliders. We say they're exploding matter to witness its particles, but in reality, what they're doing, they're reverse engineering matter. By seeing what it explodes into, all they have to do is reverse that and say, hey, if we take these particles here and we use this much force, then we should theoretically be able to squeeze them together again and make matter. Alchemy, taking lead and turning it into gold. Theoretically, it's very possible. Physically, it takes a lot of energy. Now, what they're working with now is super high energy colliders. The Germans are working on one right now, which is a toroidal magnetohydrodynamic force generator. And basically, when that thing's in operation, it will create a wormhole, a gate in space, in time, within the inner sphere. Because if you look at a magnetic vortex, anytime there's such a magnetic sphere and it's got spinning mass inside it, it's going to create an electromagnetic field. And that field's going to twist and contort. It's going to condense just like a micro vortex. And it's going to condense in upon itself and become like a sheath into another dimension. Now, the trick is controlling it. That's the thing. You know, tokamak designed to control the plasma of a fusion reactor. Well, these things aren't doing that. They're just going to contain the force of the gate, the magnetic force of the gate. But there's one tiny microscopic point of what they call the wellhead. A black hole would be called the event horizon. On a gate, it's the point of injection, which in other words, you go from one dimension to another in a split, not even a second. And see, time is null and void in that zone. Time is null and void because physics is null and void. The gauge field of a particle from this dimension here, entering that gate, is still in the same relative gauge field as it is here, even when it goes into that subatomic point. And when it emerges on the other side, it's still in the same physical characteristic of what it was. But now it's observing another dimension in time. It's very similar to this dimension, but it's opposite. Light appears red there. It appears blue here. Certain things are different there. They're real similar, but they're different. That's why a lot of times when you dream, you think of numbers or something, but you think that's weird. It's like it's backwards. And then you wake up and you say, wow, I remember that, but now I'm forgetting it because I'm thinking about it. But when I was there, I remembered it perfectly. It made sense, but it just seemed backwards. It seemed like I'm in a house, but I'm underwater. And then when you're awake, you're in a house and you're in air. It's because the dimensional makeup is different. Dimensional wells is a lot like deep sea diving, like really deep sea diving. The technology to keep a human being alive in another dimension requires similar equipment as a deep sea diver would wear. The only difference is they don't have to breathe mixed gas. And the only reason they breathe mixed gas here is not for the pressure. It's because oxygen and nitrogen mixtures become toxic below 2,000 feet. They become,
Hey,
they become
hey,
yes.
Pat, let's get Jay a question in there because he's used to running that yapper. We got to get he'll blow away if he don't get at least one question in
Oh
there.
yeah, let's
You're
do
doing
it.
good. I love it. But let me hear a Jay question, and then I know we're doing it presentation style, but I don't want Jay to blow away, so we got to give him some helium.
Yeah, I was watching them turn red there.
I don't even know where to start. I'm fascinated by everything you've been saying. So, and
Great.
I wrote a huge thing of notes, and I'm like, ah.
I told him, Pat, this dude will trip you out. You'll feel like you're in an X
Yeah,
Files episode.
he did say that. Yeah, he did say that. So I'd like to go back, if you don't mind, to the Enigma story you told us about. Was that hardware or software, or was it technology? What was that? I mean, I don't think you really explained what it actually was besides what it did.
Okay. Enigma is a combination of software and hardware development. Enigma consists of about 12 subsystems to literally teach a quantum computer how to understand language. We had to create an interface. So Enigma itself is the library, a virtual library of algorithms and language. All the known possibilities of known language meanings, language comprehension. And it's all put into a software program, which is an artificially intelligent program, which learns. Now, Enigma is basically the design of the algorithm. Okay. When we call it an enhanced numeric intuitive machine, grammatical machine algorithm, that's just basically a parentheses of the software itself. The software itself is a self-learning, self-teaching STRAM, which we call self-teaching random access memory. But what good is it to do to learn if you have no way to remember?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we had to develop deja vu. We call it deja vu because it's like Enigma says, "Oh, I remember that before."
Like 51st dates. Yeah, I understand
Right.
that. Yeah.
Now, originally we developed deja vu as an LPIF, which is language protocol interruption feature. We call it that. That's a new invention because when you start teaching machines language or any kind of intuitive intelligence, we have to understand if we're going to try to make it human or think the same way a human being thinks, we have to understand all the human conditions of thought. And we know through much research and experience that during cognitive research of remote viewing and other psychological research, human beings tend to analyze their thoughts. Now, a lot of times they'll analyze something and it's incorrect. Their conclusions are incorrect. Now, the last thing we want to do is teach a machine how to think incorrectly and give it rewards and say, "Oh, you're doing great," like a spoiling parent would do to their kid, and the kid grows up to be a molesting idiot, because the parents say, "Oh, that's good. It's good to beat your sister," So we want to make sure these machines don't learn the wrong meaning of a word or the wrong comprehension and context of a word. So part of the process of Enigma was to create a learning experience for the convoluted neural network of failing. And then we had to figure out a way to make it realize it failed and don't do it again. So how do you punish a machine? Well, you don't. a machine feels no pain. So we had to create a form of pain that a machine would understand and feel. We had to give it a semi-conscious awareness of failure. In other words, it doesn't like to fail because it's mathematically programmed to not like to fail. So when we make it not like to fail and we reward it when it succeeds, we basically cause it to stop analyzing itself, because it's going to want to do that automatically, because it has access to a logic track, which is called an Octonian holographic logic track, which is basically the Enigma is a virtual library, and it's laser encoded, and in those lasers is all the encoded algorithmic formulas. Now, a human being could sit there and tweak it for months and get the right algorithm, but a quantum computer can do it in seconds. So I know I can take that and throw it together and it'll work. Make this do this. But darn it, I didn't want the computer to think this when I did it, because it's doing the wrong thing. Write that one off. Let's take it there. Let's do it again and again. It goes through what they call an algorithm injection module system, an AIM system. Now, when I say it's injecting it into the holographic logic track using a laser, interface lasers. And those two lasers are basically entangling code and language at the same time. A machine doesn't understand language like we understand it. It understands it mathematically. So we had to give the machine a way to identify, separate mathematical numbers with language patterns. So that's how Envision came about. Envision's like a subatomic microscopic printer, which literally prints a camouflage shape of energy upon these algorithms, which has a specific shape for a specific word. Now, because I told you the Envision machine can photograph at an instant, high speed, things at the speed of light. Okay, these encoded numbers, basically, but they're not numbers, they're particles. They're particles of matter, which aren't really particles, but they're electronic particles. So when they go into the when the algorithm injection module system, the Envision's looking at it. It's looking at every code of the algorithms that are going into it. Now, Deja Vu is sitting there at the entry point, and it remembers what worked last time. It'll kind of like knock out the wrong code and put in a new code real quick. And okay, as we see the machine getting faster and smarter. Deja Vu logs what works and libraries that off into a log. And you can take this log, imagine a giant cylinder, and lining that cylinder wall are millions and millions of slots of successful algorithms. Those are cataloged. They're virtual, electronic memory. So we don't have to keep redoing it. And through a process of thousands of hours of simulated machine runs, the machine learns, and then it starts modifying its algorithms to streamline them. What we say works great, the machine knows what works better. Now, the problem here is when they start getting so intuitive that they try to change the thought, we might say, we want you to cause an effect here. And it's thinking we're talking about something else and tries to change the code. So it's a fine line to walk, to teach the machine and to allow it to run wild. Well, we've gotten to the point now where with Jenny and Enigma really was the original software platform. Now Deja Vu is kind of taken over. Now Deja Vu is like a mini subconscious of the machine. It's a virtual subconscious of the machine. Enigma is basically the brain, the hardware. It's the software program, but it's the hardware of the project. And Deja Vu is the virtual subconscious of Silver Monkey. Now, having a subconscious is good because it's kind of like the moderator of language. And it's sitting above Enigma, watching what it's doing. A human operator is going to talk to the computer. Enigma is kind of just doing the functions of the brain. Deja vu is doing the thinking, the intuitive thinking. And saying, I know he didn't mean that. He meant this. And in a light speed, it tells it what to do. It comes to a point where we let it run and do its own programming. That's where Colloquium comes in. Colloquium is a machine written by Deja vu, basically. We kind of watch it and see what it's doing. I know everybody's heard the story where Google had two computers communicating with each other and they shut it down. That was an accidental event. We kind of took that event and utilized it to allow this to happen. Actually, Deja vu is an offshoot of thinking the machines were making mistakes, which led us to find out later that somehow the machine was getting information that we didn't put in it and it shouldn't have got, but it's getting it. Where's it getting it? So that's how we came up with Dragon. It's getting information outside of our dimension. It's finding intelligence, and it's annealing it itself, and it's talking to itself. Kind of like a human being talking to itself through a task.
Yeah.
You know how we talk ourselves through a task sometimes?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The computer's doing the same thing, but in another dimension. It's saying, I wonder why am I thinking this? Why don't I do this? Because I'm smart. I'm going to try something different. And as long as we let it do that, it's fine. And we end up coaxing a language out of it that works, that we can type on a standard computer, and it will take it and translate it into computer code for us. So Enigma is basically a 3-part deal. Enigma is the library, the logic track, the linear logic track. Deja vu is the trainable software program that is the subconscious of the program.
Memory, yeah.
And Genesis is the actual interface, human interface, which is basically like a large monitoring console, like in a remote viewing session. Yeah. Only the monitors trained to speak the script to the computer, and the computer recognizes that operator through biometrics. And it's being monitored also remotely, the teaching of the software. And we've let it play. We've let it run wild. Not wild, but I mean, we literally had to create a program called Asterius, which is the Latin term for gatekeeper. Okay. But it is actually an operating system, technical interruption, and resolution, universal independent shutdown. That's what it means.
So sounds like the guy Tron from the movie Tron. He stops all unauthorized computer interactions.
Yeah. Well, Asterius is an artificial program. And it's kind of like on a ship or a car, your computer adjusts for the fuel flow and stuff. When you got bad gas, your car still runs great nowadays. In the old days, it'd die. But it still runs because the computer's doing all the fixing. Asterius does that on a subatomic scale. And if something happens and the computer starts doing things we don't want it to do, it will shut it down. But you can't just shut it down.
Also, what I found fascinating is you said that the computer was thinking for itself and like analyzing what it's thinking, and then also getting information from another dimension. So my next question about the hardware again was, where was the computer? Where was the quantum computer? Was it one we built or one that you're seeking in another realm?
No, it's one we built.
Okay.
Now here's the thing, but it's accessing another realm because it's in quantum superposition as a D-Wave computer. I'll send you guys some more information on a D-Wave computer. They're literally talking to other dimensions. Wow. I put a video up on, I think I put it on Church of Mabus site.
Yes.
The founder of D-Wave put that video out there. It's got a lot of showmanship, but actually it's true. A quantum computer is not talking to information here and now. It's talking to all information available now, which is past, present, and future.
Mm-hmm.
So
because the past, present,
what's the ultimate goal? And for some reason, I keep thinking of Mecha Godzilla because I saw Kong versus Godzilla. I was like, do you have Mecha Godzilla in a warehouse somewhere?
Well, here's the funny thing. When they built the quantum computer, they had no use for it, no practical use other than simulations. So we kind of came on board and thought, well, for one thing, we know it's smarter than we are. It ought to be able to listen to English. We ought to be able to talk to it, and teach it. And just as you can teach a kid to teach, right? Through life, we can teach a kid to become a teacher and to teach other kids. Well, our ultimate goal initially was to first see if we could program a computer vocally and make it do simple functions. Then we realized we could teach the computer to teach itself. And through accidental experimental research, we realized we thought this information it was getting was analytical overlay. And we thought it was wrong information. But a lot of the information it was giving us was real because it happened later. So we realized, wait a minute, how's this knowing this? Hadn't happened yet, but now it's happening. As it explained, it was going to happen, but hadn't happened yet. So where is it getting this information from? Well, it's getting the information outside of the zone I call the space between here and now, the timeless zone where remote viewers work from. Past, present, and future all exist at once. The future is in a wave. The past is in a wave, and the present is a experience of that wave initially. So because we know time can become crystallized in a way, we can say, okay, well, that happened, and we're viewing this happen now. Our computer's telling us this is going to happen soon. Let's see if it really happens, and we'll do a short timeline. We'll insert what they call a time comb reference, which is we're ahead in time. We insert a mathematical qubit reset. So when the quantum computer hits this spot, the qubits flip, which is a up or down spin, a hard or a soft, or a white or a black qubit. When it's in a superpositional state, it's in all states. But if we insert what they call a qubit reset signpost, which is a time reference comb, and all of a sudden our quantum computer hits it, it sets off a signal. We say, wait a minute, we were here before because we put that signpost in. So when we're actually realizing it in real time, that qubit reset shows up. We say, whoa. That's why I theorize that crop circles are the same thing for time travelers. When they're zipping through time and they see this pattern, it's a mathematical code to their computers on their craft. And it's telling them how would you mark a planet time-wise if you were traveling through time and you're seeing the same planet but going through dimensions of time. You wanted to stop at a certain year. You'd have to put a time reference comb in there. So we're kind of doing what somebody's doing with crop circles, but we're doing it with qubits, putting them in the virtual pathway ahead of us in the future. So when our quantum computer goes ahead in time and sees these events, it marks it so we can map a future path of a wave. And that wave has events on it. And those events, we can look so far ahead into the future, put time reference combs and analyze it. And then as things start to happen, we can say, okay, this happened and this happened. We knew it was going to happen before it happened. So probably the things we know are going to happen will happen. And then you can go one step further and modify it. Do we want to modify the future? I think we can and should if we could. We're given that opportunity to a point. Now, a lot of people say the Mandela effect is a result of all this. Very possibly. It is. Very possibly. The Mandela effect is an event where you might have an ancient Bible, a King James Bible. But then all of a sudden, something in the Bible, everybody in the now says, it says this. But you remember from the past, it didn't say that. But you go and find your Bible that hadn't been opened in 20 years and open it up. It says that. But I know it didn't say that before, but it says it. And all the Bibles in the world say that. It's a qubit reset. and it's left in an informational state, which affected the present, which physically it seems impossible, but that's a very quantum effect of modifying the future. Now, I don't think we can ever modify ourselves out of reality. In other words, an accidental mistake. I don't think machines will ever take over to the point where they'll kill us, but already machines have taken over the world. We're run by AI. We would fail. We would go back into the Stone Age if we lost our technology, because we operate off artificial, intelligently run telecommunications networks. All our nuclear missiles are operated by electronic communications and satellites. All our power grids are run off computers. Everything's AI. So quite literally, we are already taken over by AI. Now, the trick is to stay ahead of the game. Because as in the old days, there was a space race. Now there's a space race, but it's a subspace race. Whoever controls the subatomic space controls the Earth. It used to be outer space. Now, the United States Space Force is not what everybody thinks. It's not all about outer space and flying to the moon. It also has to do with cyberspace. The United States Space Force has a cyber unit, and special projects and classified experiments is a intelligence branch of that division. You can't have a military without an intelligence group. You can't have, the Army has the Defense Intelligence Agency. You can't have a force without an intelligence gathering capability. Well, the United States Space Force has actually got what they call cyber boot camp going on now. It's looking for smart people, training them on software tactics and binary encryption. Instead of going to school and learning how to be a tough guy, you go to school and learn how to be smart, you know? And that's what the U.S. Space Force is doing. It's not all about outer space, but inner space is a bigger theme of it. It's not to say we don't have stuff.
What else can you tell us about alien stuff? That's what we like for sure. We like it all,
Okay.
but any other alien stuff we can get into for sure.
Yeah. Let's tell you about extraterrestrial software. The name sounds funny. It sounds alien. And when I was telling you about the intelligence outside of the Earth, outside of this dimension, there is other intelligence. Now, whether they're beings or not, we've created a program to talk to them and gather information from there. It's a binary program. It's called extraterrestrial software. Basically, it uses the program Colloquium. And as I was talking about the crickets and the birds chirping, whales, all animals, elephants, whales, walruses, crickets, frogs, they all speak in one language. It's called binary. Why has nobody come up with the idea that, okay, why can't we understand what they're saying? Well, we can. The program Colloquium can determine, it can translate binary language into numbers. Then those numbers can be annealed into a pattern. And the patterns can be analyzed into a coherent, logical format of meaning. Okay. Animals don't speak in language. They speak in clicks and sounds, but their brain translates it like a computer does into a meaning. Just like we hear a voice, it's a vibration. It's a sound. It doesn't really mean anything unless our brains were trained to translate it into a meaning. Our brains are doing exactly what the insects do. They just speak in a higher frequency language. And they speak it in a form that is very loud, but they understand it. You know, the Bible says, night after night, the universe displays knowledge. Day after day, the earth pours forth speech. Okay, what's that mean? Because everything in the Bible is a quantum textbook. It's describing quantum mechanics to a T, from Genesis to Revelation and everything in between. Everything Jesus spoke of was quantum mechanics. Faith is the evidence of things unseen, the belief in things hoped for. Okay, quantum mechanics says if you don't believe what you're looking at, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to see it. It won't appear. It's not going to appear until you believe it, and then you observe it, and then you say, oh, I just observed it, and it manifested. But if I didn't believe it, it would never manifest. See, everything is quantum mechanical. That's why Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within. Everything he told his disciples was science. They didn't understand it because they were earthbound. They were looking out. He was trying to tell them to look in. In other words, he said, the kingdom of heaven, every time he described the kingdom of heaven, it's a quantum description of a dimension, a dimensional gate. All the prophets, when they said, and behold, I saw the gates of heaven open. Okay. They're just looking in front of them and they're seeing gates open. And they were taken there. Quantum teleportation. They call it translation in the Bible. But in reality, it was a documented form of teleportation. The Enoch that had got baptized and all of a sudden was transported. Philip was transported, just disappeared, and he appeared in a village miles away all of a sudden. The Bible said he was translated. Well, how do you say now he was teleported? So the Bible is an ancient description of quantum technology. Funny thing is, Hebrew is a quantum programming language to a point, to a cue. So is cuneiform, so is hieroglyphics.
Really?
Our ancient AI machine language. Now, I say this, there's scientists that took the Hebrew language and can program a computer with it. It's an actual language. Wow. We've gone one step further and shown cuneiform. If you look at cuneiform, it's a perfect description of a mathematical machine tree. How you would lay out a machine language that it's using graphical descriptions. See, it's graphical shapes in a certain position that an AI machine would understand.
And I've got a good follow up to that point that you just made there, especially going back to the cuneiform with the Sumerians. They have actual pictures, the stelae carved into walls of DNA spirals in their artwork. Exactly. How the hell are these people getting DNA spirals? They don't have the microscope. Microscope doesn't come around for another almost 2,000 years or more. Right. Can you explain that?
Well, the microscope reemerged. They had technology that we wouldn't believe before the flood.
Yeah, we've heard that.
Here's something. You watch these ancient shows like these ancient cities in Thailand, and up on the top of the mountains, there's huge stones just scattered everywhere, and they're carved. Now, and you look at stuff and you see the stonework in these temples, and it looks like coral, like they've been underwater a long time. And the pyramids, okay, we say the Egyptians built them, but who says that? The Egyptians say that. But really,
and Zahi Hawass, who's absolutely wrong.
remember the earth before man was created was occupied. We weren't the first people here. We were the latecomers. Originally, beings called angels lived here, which are a little higher than us, it says. And they were basically immortal. They didn't have physical bodies. They were physical, but they didn't die. They were a higher energy state. They had to be physical because they built things.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, we're told in Genesis, God planted a garden east of Eden. And we kind of keep going, but we forget, okay, wait a minute. East of what? What is Eden? Well, it must be a city because it's east of it. You don't plant a garden next to a garden, you plant it next to a city. So Eden was a city. And we know that God had many thousands of angels that did his work for him as an intelligent energy being. He created these beings to do his work for him. Mm-hmm. And they had no technological limitations. They had no physical limitations. And there's places on the earth today where you can see stones cut out with laser precision and missing, like the stone at Baalbek. Now that's a stone still in the quarry.
Yeah.
Puma Punku. Aliens. Let's get back to that. So back in the day, there was flying craft that resembled what we call UFOs, and now the new term is UAP.
Yeah, UAP
phenomena, right? So, or unexplained aerial phenomena.
Right.
It's just another term for the cancel culture people. I still like UFO.
I like UFO.
I like UFO. Let's just stick with the old term.
And there's many examples of that in the Bible. We all don't need to go through that and rehash it because there's all kinds of examples of UFOs in the Bible. The flying biscuit by the river Chebar. And he saw the eyes about and a figure of the Son of Man. He saw a human-looking guy up there looking out at him. And it had, we've seen the description of the Eric von Daniken helicopter-looking thing and all this. Those were probably just landing craft, and those were probably the doors that closed up when it went up. And the wheels had spokes. They had the rims, like you can imagine, the round rims.
Right.
And those moved when it moved, and they went up when it went up. And it sounded like a loud voice when it talked to him. He was witnessing technology. He just didn't know how to describe it. So let's say the angels ruled the earth then because they were more superior. They built massive cities. They were still immortal. God made man in our image. Now, was he talking about himself, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit? Or was he talking about him and the angels' image? Okay. But we're going to make them a little lower. We're going to make them immortal originally, but not as tough as the angels, because the angels were slave workers, basically. Now, so he made man, and the lead angel kind of got jealous because he had human emotions. And then he got jealous. And then some of the other angels fell out of grace. In other words, they saw what's going on in the earth with the humans. They saw humans mating probably and said, oh, that's weird. We don't do that because we're all males, for one, and two, we don't need to mate because we're supernatural. But they could have the ability to materialize and take on flesh. And they could take a wife and act like a human. And they did. Because their DNA is where we came from. It worked. The only problem is it was a different mixture. And so the kids came out mutated giants, literal giants.
Nephilim, yeah.
The Nephilim. And those were the kids. And they actually became cannibalistic. So now let's come ahead 2,000 years, 7,000 years. The Bible says there was giants on the days before the flood and even so afterward. Now, we're told that there's, in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. So in other words, there was giants then, there's giants now. Well, you've heard the story about the soldiers in Afghanistan killing the red-headed giant.
I've heard that one, yes.
Recently, no, I haven't heard that one.
This is a while ago. It is a long. It's been a story's been around for a while. Yeah, I've heard of it for sure.
But the soldiers in Afghanistan found this big cave, and before they knew it, this giant, red-haired giant came out and speared one guy right through him. 24-foot tall giant, and it killed a bunch of them before they got it killed. Then they flew it off and took it to probably Fort Bragg or what. Area 51, but it was a giant. Now, how did he survive all these years? Well, there's word that in the Antarctic, they found a bunch of them frozen in a state of hibernation, basically. Remember when Barack Obama got elected, they all went there, even the Pope, Kerry, Obama, the Clintons, they all took a trip to the Antarctic. Why? Why would you go to the Antarctic out of the blue?
Yeah, it's not a vacation spot.
Because they found something. They found some stuff. So now let's go into what's going on in the world today. These beings, ever since the Great Flood, were physically wiped out, but they're immortal beings, they're spirits, they're energy beings. They just didn't have a body. So now Jesus came on the earth after the flood, and all over the place he went, he cast out these beings of human beings. One being had 10,000 of them in him. The guy by the tombs.
The pig story.
Jesus asked, yes, Jesus asked them, "Who are you?" And they said, "We are a legion, for we are many." Well, a Roman legion had 10,000 people. So there was 10,000 demons approximately, and there's one guy. Because there's no limit on space when you're subatomic, on your energy. So they knew who Jesus was, and it wasn't the time. So Jesus having a good sense of humor, I think, because the Romans ate pork and Jews didn't.
Yeah.
And they asked to be cast into that herd of pigs. Well, guess what? Jesus said, "Sure. Welcome to McDonald's." Go into the pigs, and the pigs freaked out and ran off the cliff and drowned. So the townspeople, instead of saying, "Oh man, thanks for saving this guy," they kicked him out of town because they were afraid of the Romans because they just lost their meal. So what are these demons? Well, they're highly intelligent, disembodied Nephilim. Okay. They're very evil. They have no soul. They have spirit. Okay. Now, the lead archangel is super intelligent, and he still has authority on this earth. He is the one in command. So he has the technology to take DNA, because he knows how it was all done originally, and to make bodies. Okay. So he's subtle because he lives forever until he's condemned, until he's cast. So he knows he has a lot of time. He's been taking a lot of time, 7,000 years, and creating a deception using high intelligence and manufacturing beings to embody with the energy beings we call demons. But now he's had 7,000 years to train them, to train them. And the deception is, you guys are aliens. You're here to help the humans. I'm going to give you craft because I am the Lord of the air. I can make craft out of nothing because I can control matter. I can make spacecraft. I can make technology. We will give it to the humans like we did before. The story of the Anunnaki and the gods giving technology. Same thing. We're not that smart, but we found technology all over the place. And a lot of times it was from crashed vehicles. Now, we were told that these were alien beings because they looked different than us and they were there. Okay. They're manufactured from genetic experimentation. Why do you think cows got abducted and their organs were taken, and human beings have been abducted and seeds were taken, and then babies were in womb and then taken? And it's all the stories of abductions are all very spiritual in nature. There's physical events, but a lot of it's spiritual. Put it this way: if they can travel interdimensionally, they can take people interdimensionally. Right out of their bed, right out of their body, while their body stays there. Or they can take them physically. And then they'll lose time, and everybody in the room loses time. How come? Because they were embedded in a vortex. The same vortex I'm telling you about, where time doesn't exist. So they disappear, they come back, and they thought it was seconds, and hours had passed. And they think, they just went to sleep a half hour ago, and they look at the clock, and it's 3:00 in the morning. And they just left about 9:00. But they thought they were only gone for a second. And then there's been examples of husbands watching somebody disappear and thinking they disappeared on them. And then all of a sudden they're back saying, "Where'd you go?" She said, I didn't go anywhere. I've been right here the whole time. "No, you left. I saw you leave. And then you came back." So there's got to be a scientific explanation to all this.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as not explained in science. If it happens, there's a reason for it. And now most often we're finding out that I used to think they were aliens. I really did. I thought there was aliens everywhere. But I've come to the conclusion there is beings out there and they're everywhere. They're not human. Now, there's other beings out there that are good and that resemble humans. And they're here too. They're not the bad guys. They don't interact with humans as much as the bad guys. But as they did in the days before, they do now. You know, nothing happens by accident. America's not the greatest country on earth by accident. It's here for a purpose. Now, what's amazing is the technology we have garnered from these beings, such as the TR3B, which nobody really understands what it means. Okay. From what we understand, what we're allowed to understand, it's the terrestrial reconnaissance third build. It's the third model. And it operates off a dynamic impulse drive. Now, the release documents say it's mercury, highly pressurized. The only thing is mercury can't be compressed because it's a liquid. You can't compress a liquid. You can only compress the air around it because you can't compress water. That's why hydraulics works. Well, you definitely can't compress liquid mercury, but you can compress the container it's in if there's a void. So let's say you pressurize mercury, which they found under a lot of the pyramids, even the ones in China, pools of mercury. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one theory is it's part of the magnetohydrodynamic generator design, acting as a reflector of the electromagnetic waves being formed in what we call the Queen's Chamber, caused by water going through the channel under the pyramid in a larger chamber, which allows the water to flow up and compress the air, causing a sonic vibration. And the piezoelectric granite pathways act as electrical generators, like an electrical transponder. Once this magnetic generator field is set up in the middle of the pyramid, it's actually energy, and it's made by spontaneous effects of the water going through the chamber, which they've tried to pump dry and they never could. It's an unlimited supply of water, basically. The water table there under the Great Pyramid of Giza. And there's one in China, and there's one in Russia, and one in Ukraine, all around the earth in one path. Or all
There's
the
one
big
in Mexico too that's got a huge pool of mercury. They just found it like a year or so ago, 2 years ago.
Right. You know, the neat thing, all the big pyramids that are hidden, that aren't shown on national TV, they're all on one band on the earth. They're not scattered randomly. They're on one band, which gives you a clue as to what they were doing. Because at one time, the earth didn't have an axis. It spun perfectly circular. And anything spinning has to be balanced. And why would you use massive stones unless you wanted to create a very dense field of balance on a spinning object? So the pyramids are like lead weights on a tire, but they serve more than that purpose, because where they balanced at was a perfect focal point of energy. And they basically were an amazing device, which created a Tesla tower of energy, basically. Why would you need that? Because it created a blanket of electricity around the earth to be utilized by all the technological advanced civilizations that lived there before we did, that built Pumapunku, all the giant, massive ancient cities in the jungle that we now think, why did they abandon them? Well, they didn't abandon them. They got flooded out. The people that lived there before just disappeared, and all of a sudden these civilizations grew up around these, and they kind of copied their culture because they said, oh, look at these things. We're like this. We built these. So as time went on, they said, oh, we built those. But yet they're 10,000 years old and covered in coral and sea life. So My belief is aliens aren't aliens per se. They're other than human beings, and there's several types. But basically, there's human beings and there's angelic beings. And there's energy beings, which are pure energy. Robert Monroe called them OTHs, other than human. But if you do the research, you realize they're either evil or they're good. And they're disembodied beings. They're energy.
I've seen those with my own
I can,
eyes many times.
pardon?
I said I've seen the energy beings with my own eyes many times, and I know I told you about that with
Mm-hmm.
the light beings and stuff. But I know there was one group you mentioned, and I saw that horror movie, Tall Men, which it was really weird. It's worth watching. Definitely a
Yeah.
strange movie. But what is your thoughts on those tall whites? And also, I know there's these forces of evil, but do you think there's going to be like a Christ versus them situation playing out, like end
Uh,
times?
yes, I do. I think it's playing out now. I think actually uh, a lot of the technology we got wasn't necessarily garnered from the bad ones, the crash vehicles, but was given to us for reasons of maintaining superiority. Now, until we lose our moral background, our moral foundations, that technology could be stripped from us. But right now, the majority of the people in the United States are morally good. Now, there's a lot of bad people, don't get me wrong, but we're swiftly losing our moral authority. Now, I believe that one day there's going to be a war with these beings. I think they're setting up the world right now. Well, put it this way: we're told that the beast will rule the earth, and there'll be one world government, there'll be one world monetary fund, and all these things come from a quantum textbook called the Bible, which basically is an encoded book of life. Just as the Jewish atheists that first wrote the Bible code, the first book, was trying to disprove the Bible as being a book written by the Holy Spirit. He became a believer. He not necessarily of God, but a believer that this was written supernaturally, because in it he realized that there's 3 languages that wrote the book on by 40 different authors through a period of 1,400 years on 3 continents in 3 languages. So basically, and the books work like a bookend of Revelation and Genesis, and in between the books is every event that ever happened, will happen. Happened, is happening now, and will happen. And the funny thing is, what's happened will happen again. And what was written about in the old pertains to the new. Because we're told you develop faith by hearing, and by hearing the word of God. We're told in quantum mechanics, all things are strings, vibrations. We're told in the beginning was the word, a vibration, and the word spoke light through the motionless void, because his face moved upon the abyss, which is the void of scaffolding of space. I told you about the dark energy. And he said, let there be light. The voice, the vibration created light, and it went through the motionless void and created matter. Now, but before it was created matter, there was energy, there was intelligence. So I think what's happening now is the culmination of all these predictions. And no matter what we try to do, they're going to come to surpass. They're going to manifest into reality. They're manifesting daily. The question is, how do we accept it and utilize it for the good? We can do one thing. We can bury our heads in the sand and say it's not happening. We're conspiracy theorists. Or we can say scientifically we're researching this and we say things are happening. We're watching things happen every day that never happened before, that don't make any sense. but they do make sense if you read what it says. Good will be called evil, and evil will be called good. Events that are happening now, parents turning on their children, children turning on their parents, all these murders going on. So things are happening, and the question is, what's happening, and why is it happening now? Well, here's why. I think it's happening because it was written to happen. Okay, because we develop faith by hearing. Okay. We don't develop faith by reading. It says you develop faith by hearing. Okay. And it says you got to speak. Well, when you read the Bible and it says the abomination that causes desolation in the Old Testament, talking about the future. Okay. Well, remember, this was written in Hebrew. But if you hear it, and they knew we were going to speak English now, for the most part. So they knew back then that we were going to speak English, and we're going to hear the abomination that causes desolation. Guess what? That surpassed already. That already happened. America was the abomination that caused desolation. Obama dropped more bombs than any president in history. After him, you have to look at the Revelation 14 where it says 7 kings. And you got to say, okay, what's that pertaining to? Babylon. Babylon is a description of the world system in the old times and the new times. And then you have to say, what are they talking about here? 7 kings. Why would they tell us that? Well, because they're talking about the superpower, the last superpower before the beast. There's only one superpower before the beast. That's the United States. 7 kings, 7 presidents. Okay. There's 7 presidents alive now. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and 1 is to come, and will continue a short space. After him comes the 8th, and he is of the 7. Okay. Well, Biden fulfilled that. Obama fulfilled the 6th. Trump fulfilled the 7th. And he continued a short space. 4 years is short. Now, Biden is the 8th, and he is of the 7. We're told that. So when you see these things happen, as a quantum computer gives us time code references, the Bible does the same thing. That's a quantum time code. When you see that happen, that's a reference. So I bet my money that Biden's going to somehow bring in World War III, and we're going to see all this stuff manifest. Not because he's good or smart, it's because that's the way it's planned. He's just the one to do it. I mean,
it's looking like it with China and Russia and Ukraine, and then China. And I just put up something where I work about Bob Kudla and said the Red Dragon's up to doing stuff. They're up the stuff right now, big time. But hey, it's been really great. We have 2 minutes, and we're definitely going to get you back on. But this has been wonderful. I've really love it. What is there anything you want to plug before you go, or link, or anything? Because we got JoJo's about to appear. We got like a minute or so. So.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. Like I say, every month new stuff develops, so we can go into some further stuff next time. One other thing about the prediction. Guess who gives them the 8th is power? The dragon, China.
Okay.
Yes, and he has 10 kings that rule with him. And he has 10 kings that rule with him for 1 hour. The hour is the tribulation. Biden's got 10 prior administration people in his admin. 10 kings. So let's watch that. Like I say, it's been a pleasure. There's a lot more I can tell you guys that's not confidential, but I don't want to burn your brains out yet.
I loved it. I've had 4 hours of you, and I'm still kicking. I loved it. I felt strange when we talked on the phone the next day. I was like, I feel weird, but it feels, it wasn't bad. It was just like my brain was like, ah. But I've loved it so much. I want to say one thing real quick before we go. Yesterday, I went to the gym and I was looking out the sun, and the clouds crossed over, and I was staring at it. And it was far away, so it wasn't hurting my eyes.
Oh,
But you know how sometimes when you see a flash from a camera or you look at the sun, you'll see a spot or something weird. Well,
Hmm.
when I looked back into the gym, every person had a weird, like pinkish, like aura or energy over them. I don't know if it was their soul, but it was kind of weird, like the sun gave me
mhm.
like a vision or something. It was like I saw that the weird little light glimmer. I saw it over every single person in the room. It was just kind of a
Right.
weird kind of shamanic experience for sure.
Right.
I just want to tell that one before I forget it. Come next week, but we'll definitely get you back on. I loved it, and I jokingly said a trilogy, but we'll do a few trilogies. I like it. I love it. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Sounds great. Nice to meet both of y'all.
Yeah, nice to meet
All
you.
right, good to meet you too. Thanks so much. Everybody, you're listening to United Public Radio. Next week is Don Webb. He's got a strange book about shamanism and vampire stuff. And then also after that, Stephen Flowers, he's got a book about runes and Norse stuff. So that should be interesting for sure. But we appreciate it so much. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Jay. And everybody have a good weekend. Thanks, JoJo Montado. But I appreciate it so much, Pat, and I'll be in touch. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me. You guys have a great evening.
You too.
John.
Thanks.
Take care. All right. That's a wrap. So I guess we'll wait and see if Joe appears, and then or I'll just leave if he doesn't. He's probably partying somewhere in New Orleans. New Orleans. But and I'm sure his show's coming up next. All right,
all right, you guys.
All
right, y'all have a great evening. All right,
thanks,
I'll send
Pat.
y'all some nice stuff.
Okay, cool.
Bye-bye.
Keep posting in the group too. Take care.
Have a good one.
All right, bye-bye. All right. That was wild. Told you. Wow.
JoJo must have fallen asleep, I'll bet you.
I thought you were for a second there. I was like, duh.
No, I lost focus a few times, but it's only because I've been up since 7 o'clock. We've been moving stuff out of the house, and it's what a huge pain in the butt.
I know. I'm going to see my daughter tomorrow, and then I got an Oculus Quest 2. I got to get that. Got all kinds of stuff going on. I've been tired lately, though. This life tire you out for sure.
Oh yeah,
no doubt about it.
The older you get, the faster you tire.
I saw a weird movie he recommended, and it's decent, but it's not the best thing you'd ever watch ever, but it's weird. It's Tall Men. It's about these weird, tall, white, faceless aliens following this nerdy guy around that had a credit card. It was weird. It was on Amazon. Worth the watch for a weirdy beardy for sure, but it's creepy because that's what he kind of says. Those Nephilim and stuff make those kind of weird white bodies to house their spirits, and they're like weird pre-manufactured, like Attack of the Clones or something, like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Attack of the Clones. All right, well, I'm gonna get out of here. I don't hear the JoJo.
There's Joe.
Sometimes he sits back and just listens to see what we're doing.
Yeah. He's got his camera off too.
Yeah.
This is Midgard. I am Thor. Do not defile.
Thor's got a much more bassy voice than yours.
Do not make me smack you around.
You sound like Captain Caveman.
Captain Caveman. No.
I remember that as a kid. That was some good stuff. I'll tell you a good cartoon with superheroes by the Walking Dead guy called Invincible on Amazon. It's really messed up. It's good though. But also Creepshow on Shudder. That's really good.
Yeah, I don't have Shudder. I have to look at that. I like the Creepshow movies. They were pretty good.
$5 a month. You can handle $5 a month.
Yeah, I probably can.
Horror
Nice, cheap bastard.
crazy horror movies that you've never heard of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Crazy.
There's a lot of ones out there. A lot of horror movies out there.
They have like Asian ones. I mean, you name it. German ones. It's good though. It's worth it. All right, everybody.
Phrasing over. Yes. No, I'm not allowed to use my deep voice on air for 2 reasons, which I can't even mention him on air. Ain't it a bitch, man? All because of one little rogue experiment on Wake Up USA. I swear. Yes, I'm serious. One little rogue experiment on Wake Up USA. Now I can't use it anymore. It's
I don't know what happened.
next meeting we have. I'll have to tell you. I can't talk about it on air, but it was it was just hey, I didn't really think you could do that thing, and I did the thing, and the thing worked, and I was like, whoa. It's just bad Joe, evil Joe, bad Joe. That's all I can say.
Joe Mischief. That's what you are.
Yes, all I can say is we